Hello everyone and welcome to today's IELTS class. Just as we get going here, I'd like to do a quick sound check and video check. Can everybody hear me okay who's joining right now? Please just write some yeses into your chat if you can hear my voice. And can you see the board behind me, as that's what we will be using for the work today. Hi Prabesh. Thank you, Abhinaya, for confirming that you can hear me, and the rest of you as well. Tanu, Hani, Bunkaz, thank you so much. My name is Adrian. I will be your IELTS teacher for today in this live stream, and we will be looking at IELTS Speaking Part 2. We will practice this part of the exam, and I'll teach you a little bit of grammar notes with it as well. Of course, today is April the 21st. I'm broadcasting to you live from beautiful Budapest, Hungary, Central Europe. I'm doing fine. Thank you, Manisha, for asking. I hope everybody else is doing well today and enjoying life. Again, our materials are coming from aehelp.com for academic IELTS. I'll put that up here for you. It's aehelp.com. If you're watching these classes regularly, I strongly recommend joining our full course, downloading our 6 practice exams, and watching some videos there so you can really get the most out of these classes. These live streams complement the course. So when you have the course and you're going through the course day by day, you will get a lot more benefit from these live classes as well. If you're studying for general IELTS, then go for IELTShelp.com. Of course, make sure that you know which IELTS you need to take. General IELTS is usually for immigration purpose, moving to another country and getting an immigration status. Academic IELTS is for getting student visas, going to universities in foreign countries, and of course, for many of you, you need to complete academic IELTS at a certain level for your university studies. Of course, since we're doing speaking, please do make sure that you repeat after me. So practice your speaking at home during these live streams. Make sure that you repeat what I say, okay? So nice and loud so you can hear yourself. Repeat my questions and answers, words, sentences. If you hear new vocabulary, write it down. After the class, check it, the meaning in the dictionary, the word form, and write some sentences with it, some effective sentences with new vocabulary. The live videos are available on our YouTube channel, so subscribe to our channel, watch our videos there. We have lots of videos available for you. And then, of course, if you sign up for our full courses on our websites, you have all of these videos, full versions, no advertising, and all of the 50 live class sessions as well. So you can find those in the full course. You can use a discount. I'm giving you live 20 for a 20% discount. So enter the coupon code LIVE20 and you'll get a 20% discount on those full courses. Super chat, of course, for some of you, you already know this. It's the little $sign beside the emoji in the chat. So you can use that to donate a couple dollars if you like these live classes. Definitely make use of that and get your comments noticed. To practice the speaking section of the IELTS exam, we also offer those services on the website. Send me an email to adrian@aehelp.com for that, okay? So if you want to practice your speaking with a native English speaker and get a score and learn what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses in the English language and in your communication, it's a very smart step to do that. We charge $25 US for a 30-minute session. Some students think that's expensive, but what they forget is that if you look at the official IELTS, it's made up of 4 sections: listening, reading, writing, speaking. It costs $285 US for the test. So do the math. If you divide that by 4, for the real IELTS, you're basically paying roughly about $70 for a 12-minute speaking session there. So spending $25 to make sure that you do good on the official exam is a very smart move, okay? Writing and editing help is also available on the websites. Now, today we are going to be looking at a new category of speaking part 2, which will be about a place. Specifically, it will be a landmark. So let's take a look at those questions. And again, these are coming from our websites. And we're going to be out of the Word document here. All right. So today's part 2 speaking question is, talk about a memorable landmark you have visited. You should say what the place is, who you were there with, what happens in this place, and why this landmark is so memorable for you. You will have 1 minute, 1 to 2 minutes to talk about this topic. You will have 1 minute to prepare what you are going to say. This is a very, very standard type of question for part 2, okay? So you need to make sure you practice this at home, because most of us don't usually do 2-minute mini presentations in our everyday life. So hi Gary, hi Pachu, nice to see you in class. Hi Hadil. Good on all of you for joining today's class. All right, so before we get into our part 2 card, let's talk a little bit about it. Let's talk a little bit about what you need to pay attention to when you do this. So Tanu, if you've already done this topic twice, you should be an expert, and I'm looking forward to what kind of a response you can come up with. Remember, even if you've seen a similar type of topic as such, it's a very good idea to revisit topics in your part 2 and check how much you can improve in the quality of your answer. So Tanu, I'm going to use your comment here for a bit of important advice, because a lot of students think, oh, I should just keep thinking about new topics and new topics and new topics, because then I can cover as many topics as possible, and then probably I will do really great on the IELTS. But that's not true. That's actually faulty thinking, okay? So here are some good practice skills for IELTS, okay? Here's one. Always go back and look at materials that you've studied in the past for IELTS. Don't just keep learning new materials, but look at old materials and see how much you have improved, okay? So don't just keep trying new topics for IELTS speaking. Instead, it is a much better idea to look at topics from the past, make corrections and improvements, okay? A very good tool for this is your mobile phone. So what I mean is record your answer, check your mistakes, record again, and listen later. Now, girls and guys, even when I'm writing these instructional sentences, so even when I'm writing this down and I'm saying this, of course I'm saying it nice and slow because I'm typing at the same time, make sure you repeat me, okay? So practice your English speaking as much as possible, all right? It's really important that you do that. So even when I'm giving you instructions, even when I'm saying these sentences nice and loud, make sure you do the same, okay? So say them nice and loud after me, okay? And that's very good advice, Milad. Be confident. Stay confident throughout the whole process. Absolutely. Okay, so for part 2, as you know, you can get 4 different categories of topics. So you can get person, you can get an object, you can get an event, like a birthday, for example, or graduation, or you could get a place, okay? Now, we focused on person and object in the last couple of weeks, so today I decided to focus on a location instead. Each of these 4 different categories has a specific kind of strategy or system to answer effectively. Okay? Now, I'm not going to review person and object. If you want to see that, again, just visit our website or check out some of the videos that we have on YouTube for those different topics. Today, we're looking at place, okay? So, when you're discussing a place, what are some important details to include, okay? If I'm explaining some information about a place to a person, what should I include? Prabesh, don't feel nervous to talk in English. And in fact, a lot of people will actually feel nervous to talk even in their mother tongue if a random stranger asks them to start talking about a famous landmark, okay? So that will happen with lots of people. That's why you need to practice at home. You need to collect your thoughts, okay? You need to be prepared. Being prepared is one of the best ways, Abdo Ghanem, to remember the words that you need to say, all right? So when you're discussing a place, there's some key elements that you need to talk about. Of course, you need to mention the name of the place. Of course, you need to mention the location of the place. That's absolutely clear. Hopefully, you would all do that naturally. So sure, location is important. Okay. Along with location, there are a few, yeah, there you go, Tanu, very good. So you need to talk about the appearance. And again, Tanu, great chance for you to review. So it's appearance, okay? What it looks like, all right? Because a place is a physical, visual location. It's an object. It's in our environment, so we should be able to see it. So your listener needs to be able to see it. Now, the appearance has to be structured, okay? So you have to have some kind of a system for describing the appearance so that your listener can easily visualize it. So foreground to background, top to bottom, left to right, okay? So you have to have some kind of reasoning behind it. Shilu Jose says, talk about the history of it. Absolutely. Prabesh, I see you said that as well. So definitely the history. So where does this locate? What is the history of the location, okay? So give us the history of the location. Okay, sure. What's another one? So we have appearance, we have history, and Shilu Jose says importance. I wonder, Shilu, if you have our course and you are learning these important steps, because you are definitely giving me the right answers. Importance can also be connected with function, okay? So function is kind of the importance. With function, we mean what happens there. So what actually happens in this place that you're talking about, all right? So you talk about the appearance, you talk about the history of the place, you talk about the function of the place, and what else? There's one more step that you need to include. It kind of will be synonymous or connected often with function, but you need to think about this uniquely, okay? So remember, there's the world around us, and then there is what? Culture is kind of close, Shilu. Hadil, Radwan, I know you are actively watching these videos, and probably, I think you have the course as well, so you've learned this fantastically. Yeah, who visits there? Yeah, the people, right? Yeah, who goes there, okay? And what do they do there? Okay, so that's kind of number 4. So again, it doesn't matter if you're talking about a landmark, or if you're talking about your favorite school, or if you're talking about one of your relatives' homes. If you're talking about a place and you talk about the appearance of it clearly, you talk about the history of it, the function and the importance of the place, who goes there and what they do there, then you will be absolutely on the right track to give a nice high-level answer for that question, okay? Now, of course, jumping back to yesterday's notes for part 1, a little bit of a quick review here, because there are 2 very important points that we talked about for part 1 that you need to carry into part 2. Okay, and I saw that some of you were exclaiming that you're nervous and you get lost for words. Well, remember that when you are talking to the interviewer, you want to think about the interviewer as grandpa or grandma. You want to be loud, confident, speak in complete sentences, and definitely do not assume that your listener knows what you know, especially in this case. Often students will talk about a famous landmark like the Empire State Building, the Taj Mahal, Niagara Falls. So they'll talk about a landmark, and then they will absolutely forget that their listener might not be as familiar with that landmark, even though it's famous, as they are. So you need to be very detailed, and you want to be formal. That's right, Hadil, because you would be formal with grandpa and grandma. All right, now, remember, this is asking you about a famous landmark you've visited. There are a lot of different kinds of landmark questions, and Tanu, you might, if you're following these classes regularly, you might be mixing this one up with one that we did a couple months ago, which was a famous natural landmark that you're aware of. A famous natural landmark like Niagara Falls or the Grand Canyon is not the same as a famous man-made landmark. So careful to pay attention to details, okay? Now, good answers for speaking. Again, we discussed this yesterday, so it's a great chance for review here and to remind you that you need to follow these 4 points in order to get a high score on the IELTS, and you need to do it in part 1, you need to do it in part 2, and in part 3. So number 1, you always need to answer the questions, you need to give reasons, and you need to give clear examples, okay? You want to give quantitative information, which means numbers. So many people visit this landmark. How many people? Thousands of people every day. Millions of people each year. So you want to give numbers, and you want to give good visual descriptive information, especially when you're talking about a landmark, okay, or a place, a location. Reflect the grammar of the question. So you need to make sure that you can show that you understand the grammar of the question in your answer. Okay, that's very, very important. Keep that in mind. And of course, use conjunctions. So use words that connect your ideas. Thank you, Slay. I appreciate your compliment. I hope that I can help you a lot more today, as well as the other 86 people currently viewing this class. And please, anybody, feel free to comment, okay? Don't be shy in the class today, in the chat, as you shouldn't be shy in the IELTS speaking. All right, so conjunctions, there are 3 groups. Coordinating, that means joining sentences and phrases with and, but, nor, yet, so. Correlative conjunctions, those are paired words that join sentence elements. Words like neither, nor, either, or, whether, or, not only, but also, both, and. So those. And then there's subordinating, which is the biggest group of conjunctions in English, and they are divided into 4 subcategories, okay? Anybody know what the 4 subcategories of subordinating conjunctions are? It's a little bit of quick grammar check here for you. I told you I would teach you a little bit of grammar today. Hadil says cause and effect. Yeah, so using because, since, as a result, those are all cause and effect subordinating conjunctions. That's right, Hadil. There's time, like when, after, before, while. Tanu, because belongs to cause and effect. Hadil says contrast. Yeah. However, on the other hand, nevertheless. Those are all used to show contrast. And Hadil is in there with the 4th one. Quick. Of course, you're studying from our materials, so you know what you're doing. Good for you. Condition. Condition is like if, when, provided that. So those types of conjunctions, you need to be able to use those for high IELTS scores. If you cannot use conjunctions, Please wait to do your IELTS exam, okay? Because if you can't effectively and correctly use conjunctions in your speaking and in your writing section, there is no way that you will get over 6.5, okay? It's virtually impossible to get the level of cohesion necessary for 6.5 or 7 without clearly understanding how to use these conjunctions correctly, all right? So make sure that you do that. We'll use some of these in today's example, of course, so you'll get a feel for it. Definitely study those as much as possible, all right? So you need to include all 4 of these in your answer for part 2 as well, and you need to be organized. Okay, so you get to the question, and what is your first step? So what's step number 1 when you get to the question? Okay, so step 1 for part 2, okay? What is it? Anybody know what the first thing you should do? So the examiner will say, now we will continue with part 2 of the speaking exam. I'm going to give you a card with some questions on it. You will have 1 minute to prepare your answer and 2 minutes to talk. I'll tell you when to start and when to stop. Are you ready to begin? Okay, so Mohammed says, what, why now? Amar Wadi says, use some critical thinking. UK Sexy says, writing, start writing, visualize and apply critical thinking. Yeah, you want to visualize, you want to apply critical thinking even before you do that or while you're doing your visualizing. Tanu says, think about the topic. Absolutely, so focus in on the topic, okay? Focus in on the topic, yeah. Absolutely. The most common mistake, the number 1 mistake that students make on the IELTS exam for part 2 is they talk about the wrong information. They talk about the wrong ideas. And guess what? Even with good English and grammar and communication, your score goes down bad, because if you talk about the wrong topic, your examiner will think that maybe you just memorized some answers and they will not give you a score over 6, okay? Because they do not want you to go to university thinking that you can memorize English and that works, all right? So identify the topic. Okay, the number 1 mistake, seriously, girls and guys, especially for those of you who actually have good English skills already, is that you miss the topic. So in this case, what is the topic? So this is our question here. Talk about a memorable landmark you have visited. What is the topic? What's the topic for our question? Yeah, Mohammed, that's right. It's a memorable landmark, okay? Sure. Okay, and then of course, along with that, identify the controlling idea. Okay, and in this case, what is the controlling idea? It's not a memorable place. It's got to be a memorable landmark. A memorable place is not the same as a landmark, Milad. If you talk about a memorable place, like I remember this beautiful park that I visited, if that park is not a memorable or is not a landmark, like for instance, Central Park in New York would be considered a landmark, but most parks in the world would not be considered a landmark, and your score would really go down if you just talked about some memorable place. Okay, this is not a memorable place. This is a memorable landmark. If you've never visited a landmark, which is hard to believe, I think most of you have, then you have to just make one up. Okay, Taj Mahal would be a very good example. We're going to use something else in the first part here. If you're not familiar with the topic, Armand, you could ask your examiner if they can choose a different one for you. They may say yes, they may say no, but you are kind of out of luck. They would expect that most of you would know what the topic is, okay? They try to choose topics in IELTS that all people in the world who would take IELTS would know, all right? So here, memorable landmark is the topic. It's not a memorable place. It's a memorable landmark. What's the controlling idea? Statue of Liberty. Yeah, just make it up, right? You can make up a lot of these The Great Pyramids. Even if you've never been there, you can probably make up a 2-minute speech about the Great Pyramids of Egypt. So what's the, thank you, Shilu, yeah, that you have visited, okay? So Minji, Jeju Island for Korea would be a national landmark, okay? So there are some anywhere you are in the world. All right, so here, the controlling idea is a place that you have visited and why it's memorable for you. So all right. Now, along with this, a very important note is identify the main grammar of the question. And that should be pretty easy, okay? But it's very, very important. So you've identified the topic, you've identified the controlling idea, and now you want to focus in on the grammar of this task 2. What kind of grammar do you think this task, or sorry, this part 2 speaking demands from the speaker? So what is a lot of the grammar that should be used in this? Not just past, so past is okay. Past perfect should definitely come in there. Past simple should come in there. Absolutely. Look at the question. Yeah, thank you, Hadil. Present perfect, you have visited. If the question says you have visited, very quickly you should be showing me, the IELTS examiner, that you've recognized the present perfect grammar. If you don't use that, then your mark will suffer, okay? So you need to focus in on that, all right? So here, it's present perfect. And of course, past simple, continuous, and past perfect. So these grammar forms should come into your answer if you're looking to score 7, 7.5, definitely for an 8 or an 8.5. You should not be talking about the future because this is not asking you what is a famous landmark that you would like to visit. So even if you talk about a famous landmark like the Statue of Liberty, if you start talking about it in the future tense, I love the Statue of Liberty. I have plans to visit there in the future. Me and my friend were talking about going there for the next summer vacation. If you do that, your score will go... It will nose dive into the ground and explode like a giant airplane full of fuel, okay? You do not want to do that because that's not reflecting this question's controlling idea. So you have to really pay attention to these points before you start writing your notes and before you start thinking about your answers. Now you start to visualize for step 2. Okay, so visualize. You want to think critically. So you want to ask what, why, how, and start taking notes, of course. Okay, so for note taking, let's identify our topic. Make sure you choose a topic that is easy. Let's go with Eiffel Tower. It's come up a couple times. It's great. Sure, why not? Eiffel Tower is a very well-known landmark in France. Paris, of course. And of course, choose one that you have information about, okay? So choose one that you know some information about. So Eiffel Tower. So let's describe the appearance of Eiffel Tower, okay? So let's first start with the appearance. Now, of course, you don't write down appearance on your notes. You only write down two words. Okay, so the appearance. So what does the Eiffel Tower look like? Great Wall of China would be a brilliant one as well. Guiwei, yeah. Okay, what does it look like? It's a tower, so okay. It's a large pointy tower. Anybody know how tall the Eiffel Tower is? Now here's an interesting piece of information. You can make it up. You can lie about that. You can just guess how tall the Eiffel Tower is. If it is incorrect, then that's not a problem, okay? You can just make it up, all right? So anybody know how tall the Eiffel Tower is? I have a pretty good idea. Just okay, so Rokano, you said it's 1,800 meters. Now that's probably a bit much. 800 is still a bit much, but it's okay, okay? Even at 1,800, I think it's about 330 something. Okay? Okay, now this is that quantitative information. Okay, this is that quantitative information that makes your speech much more clear, and you want to include these pieces of information, even if they're false. Okay, the IELTS examiners will not criticize you for giving false information as long as it's believable. Obviously, it would be strange to say 10,000 meters. Then the IELTS examiner will think, well, maybe you don't know what meters actually means, okay? So you can't say 10,000 meters, but if you say 300 or 500 or 700, that's fine. Okay, so it's a large pointy tower. It's 330 meters tall. Anybody know any other information about its appearance? What is it made of? Anybody know what is it made of? Made of iron. That's right. Okay. Any other information about its appearance? Yeah, it has a wide base. With a stone foundation? Sure. Okay. It's kind of triangular shaped. You don't have to spend too much time on the appearance. Now, don't get lost in just the actual tower itself. Anybody know what's around the Eiffel Tower? So what do you find around the Eiffel Tower? Yeah, there are lights all over it. That's right. Anybody know what's around the Eiffel Tower? Elysee Field, that's right, Indira. Very good. Yeah, there's a big green field in front of it. Now, if you don't remember the name of it, that's fine. Anybody know what's behind it? What's behind the Eiffel Tower? There's a big green field in front of it. What's behind it? And you can say how long it is and stuff. Don't jump around, Tanu. You don't want to get into the restaurant and the other parts of it. There's a river behind it. Okay, great. So that's the appearance of it, right? And then, of course, location. In the center of Paris. Sure, France. Okay, again, Grandpa doesn't know what you know, so you have to say center of Paris, France. Yeah, the Seine River is behind it, that's right. But again, if you don't know the name of the river, if you don't know the name of the field, that's fine, okay? If you don't know much about the Eiffel Tower, Prabesh, it's a good class to learn some information about the Eiffel Tower. You can apply this strategy, of course, to any other landmark. So you can apply it to the pyramids. You could apply it to the Statue of Liberty, which is on Ellis Island. You could apply it to the CN Tower in Toronto. So you could apply it to the Taj Mahal and so on, all right? So it's in the center of Paris, France. Okay, that's the appearance of it. Anybody know the history of it? So what is the history of the Eiffel Tower? Anybody know when it was built? or roughly. Again, you don't have to have exact facts and details. They can be just approximations, all right? So anybody know which year or which decade or which century? Yeah, Pachu, that's right, at the late 1800s. And it was for the World's Fair. Now again, even for these, repeat after me when I say these words. Of course, in your 60-second note-taking time, you don't have too much time, so you might not be able to write all this down, but you should be able to write down at least a good chunk of the information that we're putting up here. Okay? It can be a religious place. A famous landmark can absolutely be a religious place, Prabesh. There are a lot of very famous landmarks that are religious places, like even St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican, which is one of the most famous landmarks in the world, in Rome, of course. All right. It was used for transmission of TV signals, sure, even if that's not true, although in this case it is, but even if it's not true, you can make it up. Transmitting signals. Sure. So it was built in the late 1800s for the World's Fair, radio and TV signals. What is it famous for? What is the Eiffel Tower famous for during the time that it was built? Yeah, the citizens didn't like it. Okay, sure. Okay. Yep, that's not the history. You're getting into function there, Pachu. So we'll get that later in function, okay? All right. Okay, so history of it. Citizens didn't like it. Some of you still miss some of the most important part of its history. The world's tallest structure. Okay, it was the world's tallest structure for decades, right? Okay, now let's get into function. So definitely one of you said romantic. Yeah, a lot of people think that the Eiffel Tower is perhaps one of the most romantic places in the world, and a lot of people visit there every year to propose, right? Ask their significant other for their hand in marriage. So romantic, proposals, okay? The verb in English for asking someone's hand in marriage is proposing marriage, okay? All right, so romantic, proposals. Yep, there are restaurants. There's a lookout at the top, okay? Yep, it's the skyline of Paris. You can see a lot of Paris around it. Youth hang out there. If you've ever been there, you'll see lots of youth hanging around in the park. Okay, so those are the functions of it. So who goes there? This is the next question. Who goes there? All right, so who goes to the Eiffel Tower? Tourists, millions of tourists. People in love, of course, if we're talking about romantic, so couples. Photographers. It is probably one of the most famous places to photograph, one of the most famous landmarks to photograph in the world. Okay, great. So now we have a good amount of information for our notes in the 60 seconds. And of course, we don't want to forget about the specific questions for the speaking part 2. So here, the part 2 says, What the place is, we've definitely included all of that in our notes. Who you were there with. So we haven't answered that question. And what happens in this place? Well, we've included that. Tourists visit there. There are restaurants there. There's a lookout there. So we've included that. Why is this landmark so memorable for you? Do not ever forget the last question on the card. If you forget to answer the last question on the Part 2 speaking card, your mark will again just straight nose bomb into the ground as if a crazy person's driving a plane. Just beep, boom, and it's done. So you've lost your marks. Don't do that. Make sure you answer that last question. It's probably the second most common mistake that I see students make. The first one is they're talking off topic. The second most common mistake that I see students make is they talk about a lot of different pieces of information and they forget that last one. And because they forget that last one, it's an incomplete task. Okay? And when it's an incomplete task, again, your mark suffers. All right. Yes, you absolutely, Shilu, have to answer all of these questions. So they have to be contained in your response. Now, if you answer what, why, how, and you answer the main points for objects, people, places, events, you will cover most of this information, but you have to look at the specific questions. So I want to definitely make sure that I have that in my notes, okay? So in your notes, make sure to cover the questions on the cue card in your notes. Okay, so who were you there with? You can say something like, I was there with my girlfriend. Let's call our girlfriend Renata. That's my wife's name. So I was there with my girlfriend Renata at the time. She is now my wife. Okay, why was the place memorable? Now, in your notes, you don't need to write it down full sentence like this. I'm just doing that for practice purposes. It was memorable. Keep it simple because that's where I asked for her hand in marriage, which is not true in my case, but I can make it up. Okay? So making sure that is included in the answers. Okay, now in your notes, you'd want to keep that very simple. So girlfriend Renata, and then ask marriage. Okay, that's all you'd want to say there. So you'd want to keep that really, really simple. Now, you have all of this information, and you can accurately and quickly answer part 2, effectively getting a nice high score. All right, let's write a response here. And at home, you should practice writing a response. So at home, practice for part 2 by writing a response on paper. Okay, so that's a good first step. For practicing for part 2 is actually writing your response down as if you're writing a speech. Now, later, as you get better and better, you want to do it without writing. You want to do it spontaneously, of course, because on the IELTS, you wouldn't never have the chance to write down your full response. So here, what is a good first sentence to start with? Okay, so let me show you the questions again to give you a little bit of help. What should be a good first sentence? Okay, and again, remember, include those points that I mentioned in the beginning. So make sure to include some conjunctions, reflect the grammar, okay? Don't say I'm going to talk about Prabesh. 2 minutes is not enough time that if you're giving a good speech, you need to talk about what you will talk about. So I always tell students that for speaking part 2 and for writing task 2, don't say or write, I'm going to talk about. Just talk about it, okay? So this question remains to me about a memorable landmark which I've visited in the past. I'm not sure why it's a question. Mukta, if the examiners hurry, nope. Okay, that's a question. So here I'm looking for the first sentence. What is the first sentence here? Not I'm going to say about. Don't, girls, guys, don't say you're going to say something. You're just talking to me for 2 minutes. I just want you to start talking. If I say your 2 minutes starts now, don't say I'm going to talk about. Just start talking. Give me right away your first sentence. I have visited the Eiffel Tower last year. Yeah, sure, Tanu, much better, right? So much better. Now you're getting the right idea. Nargiza, yeah, that's a good way to start as well. I've been to a lot of significant locations, but the one I remember most is the Eiffel Tower. That's a good way to start as well. A memorable landmark I visited would be the Eiffel Tower. Exactly, Hadil. Keep it simple. That's a wonderful first sentence. Paris is the best memorable landmark I've been to. No, because Paris is not a landmark. Paris is a city. Eiffel Tower is the landmark. The memorable landmark is Eiffel Tower, which is in Paris, France. That's okay, Mohammed, but you're not reflecting the present perfect nature of the question. All right, so you want to make sure that you reflect that. Okay, so here we go. A memorable landmark that I have visited is the Eiffel Tower, located in the center of Paris, France. Okay, sure. So what can I say next? What should I say after that? Now again, use your notes, okay? When you write notes, use your notes. Throughout your part 2, okay? One of the other very interesting phenomena that I see with students when I'm testing them for speaking is they write some great notes in the 1 minute and then they never look at it. I'm watching them talk and their notes are in front of them and they're just looking straight at me and they're just talking and I'm looking at their notes going, wow, you have some really good information there and you're not using it. Of course, I'm just thinking that because I don't want to interrupt and be rude. But it amazes me how many students write notes for part 2 in the 1 minute and then don't use their notes at all. You can definitely use your notes. That's why they're there. And then, of course, look at the card as well, okay? So another really interesting, yeah, I know that they're stressed, absolutely. So there are a lot of reasons students forget to use their notes. Stress is definitely one of them, but it's really bad, okay? And look at your card too. I'm amazed at how many students read the card and then they never look at it for the whole 2 minutes that they're talking. And then at the very end, when they have to give the card back to the examiner, they realize, oh man, I just forgot 2 questions on that card. Or, oh man, I was talking about completely the wrong thing because I went off topic. So that's really bad, girls and guys. Don't do that, okay? The cue card is there to help you. Your notes are there to help you, not just in the 1 minute preparation time, but throughout the whole 3 minutes. So please make sure that when you practice this at home, you're looking at your notes and your card, okay? I've seen so many students not do that, and that's really bad. All right. Eye contact is important, but you can make eye contact between looking at your notes and the card. Okay. So, good. Now you are looking for the second sentence and you've looked at your notes. So remember, here are notes. Here we say the Eiffel Tower is a large pointed tower, wide base, stone foundation. So we want to use some of this for our next pieces of information, okay? So here, a memorable landmark that I visited is the Eiffel Tower located in the center of Paris, France. It is a massive iron structure about 330 meters tall with a wide base and a pointy peak. In front of it, there is a large grassy field, and behind it is a wide river. Okay, so just some quick notes there for you. Okay, about the appearance. After the appearance, you want to get right into the function of it. Okay, so you want to get right into why was it built, what happens there. All right. So let's get into that. So judging from our notes, what would be a good sentence to follow after this? A memorable landmark that I visited is the Eiffel Tower located in the center of Paris, France. It is a massive iron structure about 330 meters tall with a wide base and a pointy peak. In front of it, there is a large grassy field, and behind it is a wide river. Okay, what would be a good sentence to follow after that? Now we're getting into the history and the function. So start with the history next. Okay, yeah, absolutely. It was built near the end of the 19th century. Okay, not 18th century, Tanu. 18th century would be the 1700s. 19th century is the 1800s. So I often see that mistake by students. Careful with that in the listening and in the reading sections as well. So from the 1800s until 1900, that's the 19th century. Okay, so be careful with that. I see a lot of students lose marks in the reading and listening sections with those numbers because they think the 19th century is from the 1900 forward, but it's actually 1900 backward, okay? So near the end of the 19th century, right? It was built near the end of the 19th century, not only as the tallest structure of the time, but also as the iconic piece for the World's Fair. Okay, so here I'm including a little bit of those correlative conjunctions, so not only but also. All right, so it was built near the end of the 19th century, not only as the tallest structure of the time, but also as the iconic piece for the World's Fair. All right. Now, anything else in there? Do we want to add anything else? We can. If you know more about it, you can say, in its early days, it was used to transmit radio and television signals. But today, it is mostly a tourist attraction. And then that helps us transition into function, right? What would be a good sentence to continue on with? Anybody? What do you think would be a good sentence to continue on after this information? We've already talked about the fact that it's built of iron, so we don't need to mention that again. It's near the top, right here. massive iron structure. So here we've talked about the tallest building. In its early days, its is not with hyphen here because it's not it is. In its early days, it was used to transmit radio and television signals, but today it is mostly a tourist attraction. Yeah, that's right, Huzlande Paul. Each year, millions of people visit it from around the world. Okay, sure. Now, after this, we want to talk about its function. So what happens there, right? It's part of the question. So what happens there? Millions of people visit it from around the world. So we can talk about its function. Yep, you can talk about your emotions, Nazila, about how you felt about the Eiffel Tower. But I do caution you that one of the very common mistakes that I see in part 2 is people talk about emotions, abstract thoughts, and they get lost in them. It was amazing. It was beautiful. I felt so great. I've never seen such an amazing and wonderful place before. And then they just keep going around and repeating these emotional words. And they miss a lot of the valuable information that gives you your high scores. I would probably say that that is the third, fourth biggest mistake that I see students making in part 2 as they get emotionally expressive about the topic and then they miss a lot of valuable information. It's much better to be more like a robot or a businessman in part 2 where you're kind of sticking to the facts instead of sticking to the emotions. And that's so important that I'll even make a note for all of you on that, okay? So careful in part 2 speaking not to get lost in abstract emotional information which leads to circular speech and poor communication. Okay, instead, talk like a robot or businessman. Keep to facts and visual information. Okay, that's definitely a common mistake that I experience often when students are trying for part 2, is they keep repeating their emotional states and it just all ends up being one idea that they thought it was an amazing place, which is not enough. Okay, so stick to the facts. All right. Let's keep going here. So each year, millions of people visit it from around the world. Now you want to talk about what people do there, what you have done there. Don't forget, you can look back at the card, and that's a good idea. So am I talking about the right information? Am I answering these questions? What the place is? Yeah, I've definitely talked about that a little bit. Who you were there with? I haven't talked about that. What happens in this place? Okay, I'm just about to talk about that, so good. And why this landmark is so memorable. I haven't really talked about that yet, so I have to be careful because I'm still missing 3 of the 4 questions. So I definitely want to get into what happens in this place. Okay? So what happens in this place? Here's a good part to continue with. So each year, millions of people visit it from around the world. Can somebody give me a sentence of what we can put in there? What do people do? And again, focus on that grammar, focus on those conjunctions. Teenager, I'm absolutely providing vocabulary for the speaking. There's a lot of embedded vocabulary here. That's why I'm asking you to repeat after me. And if you see new vocabulary as we're doing this, make sure to write it down, like iconic. Okay, I think iconic is probably a new word for some people, so write it down. Okay. So Manisha says people go there to hang out. Many locals and tourists go there to hang out and enjoy a picnic and some delicious French wine on the grass in front of the tower. Sure, that's true. So many locals and tourists go there to hang out and enjoy a picnic and some delicious French wine on the grass in front of the tower. Absolutely. If you've ever been there, you'll know, of course, that there are these people running around trying to sell you a bottle of wine for €5. And about 20 meters that way, there's a store that will sell you the same bottle for $2 or €2. Okay. Okay, absolutely. Some restaurants. The tower itself has 2 restaurants where visitors can partake in some famous French cuisine. Right? So, yeah. And then what else can people do there? Memorable marriage proposals, yes. Among the visitors, there are often those romantics who propose to their significant others in perhaps the most commonly acknowledged romantic place in the world, at the top of the Eiffel Tower. Yeah, when you go there, there's basically someone proposing all the time at the top there. Absolutely. Okay, make sure you add complexity to your sentences. Yeah, honeymooners. Yeah, that's absolutely, there's a noun, Anmal. So not only is it a place for proposals, but also a place for honeymooners to visit. Okay, absolutely. Okay, good. So we're getting quite lengthy there. We're probably getting close to our 2-minute mark if we keep going like this. So let's not forget to answer that last question, which is, who were you there with and why is this landmark so memorable for you? So don't forget those 2 questions. And those 2 questions you can combine into one. So can somebody continue on here with using the notes? Of course, in our notes, we mentioned that we met our significant, or we took our significant other there, and that's where we proposed to them. So how can I link that information in here? What is a good way to join that idea into this information? So Tanu, sure, let's take Tanu's. So the reason why the Eiffel Tower is the most memorable landmark I have ever been to is because my husband proposed to me there. Absolutely. Okay, so link it right in. The reason why the Eiffel Tower is the most memorable landmark, and here you can actually exclaim it because you talk about the fact that it's a romantic place and people propose there. So you can say, in fact, okay, The reason why the Eiffel Tower is the most memorable landmark I have ever been to is because my husband proposed to me there. I was not just happy to be in Paris, but also incredibly overwhelmed with joy to find out that the man of my dreams wants me to be his wife. Sure. Okay, good. And then clearly it's contained in the information that you traveled there with your husband. So all I would do to finish this, okay? Anybody know what a good sentence would be just to finish this, to easily sum this up? Okay? And Prabesh, you can say it from the guy's direction, or I proposed to my girlfriend there, sure. So whichever way. Anybody know what would be a good way to sum this up? What would be a nice concluding sentence that clearly tells the examiner that you're done speaking and that's it? Anybody? What would be a nice way? Hopefully I will visit there again, maybe for my anniversary. Yeah, that could be okay. I wouldn't say that is a remarkable place for others too. That's included in the speech. I would say something like this. So I'll never forget that I was there with my husband in June of 2005. Okay? Because this in itself contains the information that it's a memorable place for you. So I'll never forget that I was there with my husband in June of 2005. And that would definitely be okay. I don't know if I would jump to future tense, guys and girls. I would stay away from that just because as soon as you jump to future tense, you're getting into the danger of running off topic. So it's not a good idea to run off topic. Okay, so here is the answer for this part 2. Let me show you the card one more time and then repeat after me. We'll read the full answer and you can practice repeating after me and making sure that you do well. So here is the question. Talk about a memorable landmark you have visited. You should say what the place is, who you were there with, what happens in this place, and why this landmark is so memorable for you. Okay, now please repeat after me, nice and loud at home. Okay? And again, you should do this with all of the materials from our websites as well when you're listening to the audio CDs for the speaking section. Okay, here we go. So please repeat after me. Everybody ready? Okay, Frankie's ready. Okay, here we go. So, a memorable landmark that I have visited is the Eiffel Tower, located in the center of Paris, France. It is a massive iron structure about 330 meters tall with a wide base and a pointy peak. In front of it, there is a large grassy field, and behind it is a wide river. It was built near the end of the 19th century, not only as the tallest structure of the time, but also as the iconic piece for the World's Fair. In its early days, it was used to transmit radio and television signals, but today it is mostly a tourist attraction. Each year, millions of people visit it from around the world. Many locals and tourists go there to hang out and enjoy a picnic and some delicious French wine on the grass in front of the tower. The tower itself has 2 restaurants where visitors can partake in some famous famous French cuisine. Among the visitors, there are often those romantics who propose to their significant others in perhaps the most commonly acknowledged romantic place in the world, at the top of the Eiffel Tower. Not only is it a place for proposals, but also for honeymooners. In fact, the reason why the Eiffel Tower is the most memorable landmark I have ever been to is because my husband proposed to me there. I was not just happy to be in Paris, but also incredibly overwhelmed with joy to find out that the man of my dreams wants me to be his wife. So I'll never forget that I was there with my husband in June of 2005. Great. Now, if you're good at speaking and you can speak nice and fast like that, it's okay if you stop a little bit short of 2 minutes. If not, you can continue on, and then you can go back to some of that information and continue with information like when we were there, we also ate some incredible escargot, which is snail. I thought that was kind of strange at the time, but once I gave it a chance, I found out that it was very delicious. Also, we sat down for some wine on the lawn. It was very romantic because my husband brought with him a picnic blanket, which had a big heart on it. Okay, so you can keep going if you want to, but make sure you don't go off topic. It's enough to stop there. You will get a great score if you can give a response like this. Okay. Marina, it does sound like like a bit of reading, but if you're giving a good response to part 2, it should sound a bit like you're reading. It should sound a bit like you're well-versed in these mini speeches, okay? When I'm giving these presentations, oftentimes they might seem scripted as well, simply because I'm so well-versed in doing presentations. But they're not. So when you're good at giving presentations, they should kind of seem scripted, somewhat like a newscaster, all right? Okay, I'll give you another variant for this. So let's do one more. This is coming from our website. Let's go full screen on that one as well. Okay, so here's an alternative one about the Taj Mahal. Again, on our website, you can find audio for this. You can find sample answers for lots of different kinds of speaking questions, of course, including part 2. So I'm going to go through this one as well. Please repeat after me, nice and loud. Is everybody ready to go for a different version? This one is, instead of the Eiffel Tower, the Taj Mahal. Everybody ready to go? Awesome. So try a different one. Here we go. Well, I have seen several amazing landmarks around the world, but certainly one that sticks out in memory is the Taj Mahal. Of course, this is a very famous and well-known landmark of India. It is located on the south bank of the Yamuna River in the city of Agra. I visited this world-famous mausoleum about 5 years ago with my family. I saw many pictures of the Taj Mahal before, but to see it in person is truly awe-inspiring. The building is made of white marble. It was built in the 17th century by Emperor Shah Jahan to house the tomb of his favorite wife, Mumtaz Mahal. It is a grand building, and my family and I spent a whole day walking around it and taking pictures of the many intricate artworks that decorate the building. I must say, it was very crowded as people from all around the world come to see this beautiful structure. There's an amazing garden that surrounds the building. Today, it is mostly a tourist destination, but there is a mosque for prayer and a guest house for lodging. For me, this landmark is perhaps the most memorable, not only because of its amazing beauty, but for what it symbolizes. The Taj Mahal is a monument that shows the grand love of a man for his wife and the extent of what he is able to accomplish with such love. It is a true symbol of the strength created by true love between husband and wife. Okay, so that's a different variant, of course. Again, you can practice a lot of these, but do remember that the key to getting a high score is not memorizing such text or even expressions, but being able to understand how to analyze objects, people, places, events, put together information quickly, accurately using your notes, and then reverb that information in a well-connected and well-structured 2-minute mini presentation, okay? So that is the end of this part 2 speaking for today. Now I'll give you a chance to ask me some questions. So any questions about IELTS speaking, especially part 2 or IELTS in general, now's your chance to ask. Of course, I'll take or I'll give answers to questions that are more specific to the lesson topic. So the more specific you are, the better chance that I'll answer your question. But you can ask me any question you'd like, okay? All right, Tanu. Can you use simple lines related to the topic? Absolutely. If you use simple lines, you can still get a very good score as long as it's good communication. Good communication doesn't have to be complex. Mukta, the examiner should not be stopping you after 1 minute. Okay? They should give you at least 1 minute. If they stop you before 1 minute, that's something strange. You should in that case almost ask them why they stopped you so suddenly. If you can't answer the last question, yeah, it's a problem. That's why it's sometimes a good idea to answer the last question early. Okay, so sometimes it's good to say, a famous landmark that I visited is the Eiffel Tower. The reason why it's so memorable for me is because that's where I proposed to my wife. So you might want to actually take that and put that into the very beginning of your answer. Okay, you don't have to give the answers in the same order as the questions. Okay, because he's asking if you complete all of the questions in part 2 and you still have some time in hand, can you go back to the main topic for the remainder of the time? Yeah, you can. You can expand more. Just be careful not to go off topic, okay? Mustafa, if you found a 25% discount code for AE Help and it works in the coupon code, absolutely use it, okay? We change our coupon codes up all the time, and we have different promotions from different sites, from Facebook, from AdWords, etc. So if it works for you, definitely use it on our website, yeah. Pachu, you can't memorize language. I mean, you can memorize some expressions and you can memorize some vocabulary, but you can't actually memorize complete responses. That doesn't work. Please, 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 all of you out there, don't try to memorize an entire response to a part 2 question. It will not work, okay? Can they ask you to speak 2 minutes? No, generally speaking, Amal, that's not going to happen because they have small time frames for each student. So in a rare case, it could happen that the examiner's daydreaming, thinking about their morning coffee, and they might not pay attention to the stopwatch, but they are pretty good at keeping to the time limits because they have student after student, and they have very strict instructions to keep the interview between 12 to 14 minutes roughly, sometimes even shorter. Okay, Yagnesh says, sometimes in part 1, the examiner only asks 2 or 3 questions and directly starts part 2. This means out of part 1, not much is effective. No, Yagnesh, that's not why. Sometimes what students do for part 1 is they talk too much. Okay, they want to ask you about 5, 6 questions in part 1, but what students do is they get asked a simple question like, where do you go to school? And then the student talks for 2 minutes about where they go to school. You shouldn't do that, okay? For part 1, keep your answers simple. Usually, if they only ask you 2 or 3 questions in part 1, it's because you talk too much for each answer. No, Kira, unfortunately not all IELTS examiners are well-trained worldwide, but most of them are, okay? Most of them are. They do get special training. They have a marking sheet that they follow very strictly, and if you by some weird chance get one that doesn't have great training or is kind of new to the game, then and your mark seems really strange, you can ask for a remark. Usually they will record your speaking, and then if you ask them to remark it, then somebody else will listen to your speaking from the recorder, and they will give you that mark. And when that person who listens to the recording is going to be someone with a very high level of training, so that the mark is accurate. Okay. Raspinder, absolutely do gesturing during speaking. You see me doing a lot of gesturing. It helps me to enunciate. It helps me to express myself. So I very, very highly recommend it. In yesterday's class, I spent a few minutes going into more details about that. That's still on YouTube. So check out yesterday's video. I talk about 3, 4, 5 minutes on using gestures and how to use them and why it's important. Tomorrow we're doing part 3 speaking, Tanu, and then next week, Wednesday, Thursday, I'll be doing reading and writing. Follow-up questions for part 2, Pachu, is actually part 3. So part 3 of the speaking section is usually questions that are related in some way to part 2. So that is part 3. They're not going to ask you anything else for part 2. Part 2 is just that card. When you're finished, you give the card back, and then the examiner will say, okay, now we will begin part 3. All right? Tanu, I did a reading on Thursday for general IELTS. I don't think that one's available on the website anymore. You have to join the full course to get that one. That's going to be up there. Yes, Lytton, in some ways part 3 is a harder section than the other 2, but in some ways not. I think probably part 2 is the most difficult for students just because it's the most awkward. We're just not used to giving mini presentations. Part 3 is just generally more difficult because it's more specific, and the grammar of part 3 questions are more complex. Okay? All right. So, girls and guys, I'm going to cut it off there. If you have some more questions, don't be shy. You can always send me an email, adrian@aehelp.com. Please do join our websites if you haven't done that already. There are 40 professional lesson videos for the course there. There's a fully interactive course that you can use on your phone or your tablet or your computer with practice quizzes. We have 6 full practice exams. I think we're the only company in the world that actually has audio for the reading and the speaking section, so you can improve even more. We probably give one of the best prices in the world for our course. Most other people charge close to $100 for their course, if not more. Some courses charge in the hundreds of dollars. Ours is a lot cheaper than that. So definitely worth your investment to visit us at aehelp.com for academic IELTS, or gieltshelp.com for general IELTS. You are very welcome, Pachu. You're very welcome, Mukta. Thank you all for watching on your weekend, and keep up the good practice. For those of you who are doing IELTS exams in the next few days, I wish you the best of luck. Okay, stay strong, stay confident. You all have beautiful brains. Have a wonderful rest of your day, or if it's late in your country, then a good evening. And if it's very late in your country, then good night and sweet dreams. Bye for now.